Guys all set? All right, hold on 1 second. Let me go through the steps here. The work session of the Napier City Council on Thursday, May 30th, 2024 will be called to order at 3:03. At this time, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, sir. The only item on the agenda today is presentation, ID 4024, Annapolis Ahead Comprehensive Plan 2040. Presenters, the Planning and Zoning Department staff.
Great to have you guys here. I know that the council want you to rush through this so we can get down to the Burtis house after this. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is our fourth work session with the council since we started the adoption process February 12th. The last time we met was May 2nd, and we went over a number of amendments that have been suggested by the council. Staff addressed, added language and some new visuals. And what I wanted to do today is really go through how that has impacted the plan and show you exactly what that looks like. They're good changes. I think I'm excited for how these things have improved the plan, and we sent out the draft last Friday as a digital copy. Just want to reiterate, if anybody would like a printed copy, please let me know either today or just send me an email. Happy to provide that. We're just, for cost consciousness, we're trying to not do excessive printing if we don't have to, and there'll probably be there might be additional changes that you suggest today. Or in terms of the schedule, I regret not having a slide to go over that, but there's 3 key dates that I just want to highlight. So by the state requirements in terms of the time frame for adopting the comprehensive plan, we have till July 11th. And so we had been identifying July 8th, which is a regular city council meeting, as the likely day where it would make sense to do a vote. We want to make sure that all of you do have a printed copy before that. And so we were looking at June 20th as I believe that's a Thursday, to basically provide hard copies to you all based on the amendments that you've shared with us and have been incorporated. And just from a logistics perspective, we wanted to set June 13th as a day, as kind of like a deadline for all amendments, communicated to us by email or otherwise, so that we can get those into the plan and we can get those into a format that they could be made official as part of the resolution for adopting the comprehensive plan. So that's just us coordinating with the Office of Law and just making sure that that's all tied up. So we can discuss those dates, but that's what made most sense sort of logistically.
Alderman Annette.
Thank you. I would like to discuss those dates because this is a living, moving document. We're not close to a final, but I had asked a long time ago, or alerted, that I want to have a meeting with my constituents when the document gets settled in. Now, I understand you're anxious to get it passed and moving, but it doesn't make sense for me to have a town hall meeting to brief my constituents and get input from them until we have something of a stable document. I think we're getting very close. I agree with you. I also agree with you that I think the changes are all very productive and moving in the right direction, although we're adding to the volume every day. So I don't know, I don't hear in your timeline something that allows time for us to hear from our constituents. I will also tell you that I'm kind of trying to figure out how it is that I will present this 1,000+ pages, including appendices, in a town hall meeting. And so at some point, I'd like to discuss with you your thoughts. It is very clear in the guidance from the land use that this is supposed to be something that is shared with the constituents. It is also very clear from all the documentation that the development of the plan, input from the plan, there were ample meetings with various forms of constituent groups, but those were all input. That wasn't a chance to review the output. And I can tell you that I'm, in particular with regard to the 12 opportunity areas, yesterday I got input from one of the opportunity areas that they're not comfortable with what's in the plan for their opportunity area. So, and I don't know, when do we consider this to be final? And I know you're trying to set forth a document or a time when we get closure, but I do think that there, at least for me, and maybe some of my colleagues feel the same way, there ought to be input from our constituents on what is the document, not what is to go into the document. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that doesn't fit your time frame because you want to vote in June.
July.
Tomorrow is June. And where's the time for the town hall meeting and whatever we hear from that coming back from our constituents?
So that deadline and schedule is not set by us, it's set by the state. And the meeting, or the last date is July 8th, not June. So July 8th would be the date where the council would vote to adopt the plan. Again, there's the 90-day rule that we've been
Yes and
operating
no.
on. We have done the extension, so that's been extended. We're entitled to do one extension, and you've used that extension.
But that depends upon how rigorous we want to be. But the council can always send it back under the 3 steps we have: approve, disapprove, send it back for further changes. So even though this timeline, July 11th, is there for what we've done for the extension, if needs be, if it's the will of the council, we can always send it back to the planning commission and say, we still need more. So I'm trying to figure out how we can keep this so that we're not doing that kind of a fairly significant step, that we're still doing the working relationship. I'm also mindful that we have the August recess coming up, and so I can see why you would want something done in July, but I'll put the question to you. What is the difference between sometime in the middle of July, sometime in the middle of September? In terms of if we're still getting input from constituents and questions and concerns, which may or may not lead to proposed amendments. I mean, the truth is, this is a huge document. I wonder how many people in this room have read the entire document, let alone how many constituents. I also agree, at some point, you just have to say, enough's enough. This is an advisory document, I hope, and so we're going to close off the advice and close off the document. So I'm putting this in a conversational way, but I have made a promise to my constituents, and I had eyeballed in June as the time when I would hold a town hall meeting where they would get to give me any input on things that they are positive about or not so positive about in terms of the plan now that it is, I think, reasonably stable.
Yeah, and I don't, speaking for Eric, I don't see that any reason why the staff can't support your efforts to hold a town hall meeting in June, so that, we'd be happy to provide the information or slides or even attend to give you backup in that work session and or that community meeting. So I really think that we can hold this together for the July 8th decision. Is it July 8th or 11th?
July 8th is the regular city council
Right.
meeting prior to the election.
That's right. Now, of course, as you alluded to, you could, as the council, remand the plan to the planning commission with specific instructions to address something. They would then have to hold a public hearing, receive comments, package it up, and send it back to you. That would obviously delay well into September or more. That's something that the council has the authority to do.
So the question that I posed, the difference between middle of July, middle of September, I have a sense that there is a desire to close this and move on. And so again, I ask the question, how critical is that 2-month difference in the broad scheme of things, given this is a plan to 2040?
I think this is a discussion among the members about how critical it is. You've seen the plan, you know what the recommendations are. We would like to begin bringing zoning amendments to you and being proactive about how to implement the comprehensive plan. And we're not going to invest the resources to do that until the plan's adopted, because you don't put comprehensive rezoning in front of the plan adoption. So it would delay us a couple months. We imagine that we would be gearing up for hiring someone, so that in September, we're there beginning the process of really actively doing planning to update our codes and bring the zoning map into alignment with the comprehensive plan. We understand it's going to take a long time to get that process to achieve that, but we wanted to begin working on that with assurance that we're all reading from the same sheet of music. But it's a matter of timing that the council sets as a matter of policy. We would like to begin sooner than later. We think we're ready. Operationally, we're gearing up for that work to start.
Well, I've expressed to you my view. I'm only one of 9, so I don't know how others feel about this, but I do want to have the opportunity to have an input on what is a document as opposed to something that's a work in progress.
Thank you, Alderman Tierney. Then Alderman Savage.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally get what you're saying, Alderman Arnett, and I thought of that like several months ago about, okay, how do I address the comp plan with my constituents? The 8 of them that are following. No offense, sorry. And but one of the tools that was enormous and still is the website. I mean, it's a website. It's been a journey, and the website has links. I mean, the latest thing on the website is, updates as of May 29th, 2024. So I have been regularly, sending, giving them this link, and it worked. It worked with the historic preservation was a big deal, remember? And then you addressed it in red or pink or whatever, and they saw that. And so I don't have to, because I don't have to say, okay, it's done, let me tell you what's in it, right? And that's going to be impossible, Alderman Arnett. It's like, so, I mean, I think it might be too late, but if they could at least, get current as they can be in the time allotted by going to, Annapolis.gov comprehensive plan. I think that's why you did it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've put a lot of resources into that website and making the print copies available at public places, the libraries, the rec centers, City Hall. and we've got a lot of positive feedback
That,
from
that was the critical path construction term, but when you came to the library and that meeting was sort of like the critical path where they got their cards in and they felt good about that involvement, and then it's sort of trust along the way. But yeah, I'm not opting for a town hall, though. I don't know. We'll see if it's warranted.
Okay, Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think, frankly, I'm at the point where I do want to be done with this and move forward with. I think this is, with all due respect, I think this is well beyond a work in progress. This is a very near final product, in my view. We've put a significant amount of work into it. Besides just the incredible amount of staff work, I think we've had at least 2 or 3 environmental matter committee meetings on this. We've had transportation committee meeting, and we've accepted and discussed public comment on all those. I've had 2 town hall meetings on the comp plan, including one recently about the ward maps, which were well received, by the way. I just think, if I'd be surprised if something major came up that hasn't. I think, frankly, if there was something major, we should have dealt with it earlier. Staff's been very responsive to making changes that we've brought up in committee and everywhere else. I am eager to get to the implementation phase personally. So that's, those are kind of my thoughts. I think if the public has any last minute changes, they are certainly welcome to submit them to us all along through the process till the end. But the one issue with the schedule, not necessarily issue, but you're not necessarily leaving time for an additional public hearing if we need to. I don't know if this is something where we would have to decide if there's substantive amendments or not. I don't think there's anything really substantive as far as really changing the overall content, but some of the overarching themes anyway. But so maybe we won't need to have a separate public hearing, but I suppose we could have one the night of the vote if we needed to, or get it introduced maybe the last meeting in June, and then we could potentially have time for a public hearing if we needed one. Just to throw that out there.
And this is the city council document here. There's a lot of influence of the city council in this document, therefore it's come from your constituents. And like Alderman Savage said, the major things, we should have already been addressing them now. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done, the individual work you've done with every city council that's come to you and said, I'm not comfortable with this. How can we evolve it? It feels like you addressed a lot of things that were worrying people. But like Alderman Arnett said, this is a really important document. This is a legacy of this council, and we're going to make sure we get it right. So. Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologize for being late, so I missed a few things, but I've gone through the purple and the pink version. I've got a few little minor adjustments. I've taken some notes, so I wanted to get it done by today, but I just couldn't. But I should have it to you in the next few days. But nothing of great major import, just some few things that I saw that maybe need a little tightening up, but maybe more emphasis. And as I indicated earlier, I want to write a forward, and I don't know how many of my colleagues would want to join in on it. I will write it in the best way that I can to incorporate everything that I've heard from them. I think some things are similar. Some things may be particular to their wards, but I think that's extremely important to kind of set the stage when we start going forward on the final comp plan. I think there's some things that need to be said that may not be specifically said in the comp plan, but kind of give it an overall flavor of what we're looking for. I think you've done an excellent job, of course, in what you already have, but I think there needs to be some emphasis put on some things. And one of the things, and I had mentioned it 1,000 times, is gentrification. That's one thing I do want to emphasize, not overemphasize, but just to make mention of it, that that's something that at least residents in my ward are very concerned about, because we've seen it all over the country. And I think I've said it before, I've been places where it used to be an African-American, for example, enclave, and all you see now are steps where the church used to be and a plaque. And it's really sad. And we won't get into Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I think there need to be some guardrails and some, a policy, unofficial, that the city is not looking to do that. I think we've got stories over and over and over again that can be told in the United States where, like I said, only the steps are left and there's a plaque and some other indignations that have occurred. And I think that's extremely important that we look at that and that we say as a city, that's not what we want to happen in our city, almost no matter what the comp plan says, but it needs to be looked through a certain equity lens. And I think sometimes if you're not part of that group, you tend to not necessarily overlook it, but you're not aware. And some things only as an African-American woman can I say that nobody else necessarily would know or even have experienced or just take for granted. But I think that's the reason why we have these people sitting on this dais now, because there's an opportunity to say what needs to be said out loud. And I'm not afraid of saying it whenever I need to say it, when I think there's a missing part to it. So, like I said, it's just a few things, but I do want to write that forward because I think it's extremely important. But thank you all so much. You've done a magnanimous job.
One thing that we were talking about in the beginning of the meeting was the schedule, and that we would need any additional content by June 13th. And that would include anything that would be added to the resolution or referenced in the resolution, like the forward that you have in mind. So June 13th.
I should be able to do it by then. Thank you so much.
Really, we just wanted to use the time to go through the updated document. So, of course, interrupt at any time. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that I think, point to specific comments that we heard that impacted these changes. So the first thing, obviously, you can see the cover here has a new statement, is a new date, May 2024. It has a new statement that acknowledges that this purple text, it's challenging to find a color that contrasted, but this purple text is the new text in the document that reflects the City Council amendments. There were changes to a lot of the goals and performance measures to make them more clear, simple text, something that communicated better to just the average person. And we didn't highlight all of those in purple, but I think for those of you who had expressed comments about that, it should be clear that a lot of them have been really distilled, I think. So let me shoot it, actually. Let me do something. I'm going to do this. One of the first things I want to highlight is when you go to plan priorities in the in Chapter 1, we added a new priority, which is public safety, and it says reduce violence and crime throughout the city using a variety of community-based approaches. And so that thing, I think that fits in well. It wasn't clear that it was under any of these other plan priorities. And so that one is in there. Let's see. And then right after that, we start the series of ward profiles. So we have a profile for each ward. We shared an example of one previously. And we have 6 highlights for each ward. And it was really just a matter, trying to distill what were the big items that we felt would impact the ward. Primarily physical improvements. There's probably a few policy ones in here, but What we're showing on the map, a new element that we hadn't shown before, is that all of the roadways that we see as needing improvements in the future to make them safer, more usable for more residents and visitors, basically to think about our roadway network as something that could be designed better and be more of a equity mobility opportunity. So it started by looking at Forest Drive and West Street candidly. Those are our two highest volume corridors. And the more we thought about it, all of our major arterials need some sort of thinking about how they could be safer. And so that's something that we actually have some new content in the transportation chapter about. But I'm not going to go through the details of each of the ward profiles, but I encourage you to look at them further. And I think it's a great addition to this plan that I think residents are really going to like, who may not want to read everything in the plan, but they can kind of go to these ward profiles. And this is in chapter 1 of the full plan, and it's in the action plan as well. And then you go into chapter 2, demographic trends. One of the things I want to highlight is this new spread that's called the growing senior population. Not only do we highlight some demographic statistics about the population over 65, but also some of the things that we need to do to service that population and make the city for them and really understand their needs. And in these images on the right, which are all new, kind of highlight 3 of the things. Housing options that allow people to age in place, close to family and friends. The ADU is one option that we think is a tool that could be utilized more in the future. Recreational opportunities, there's already a lot of programs, obviously. Pickleball, namely, has become, a huge thing for seniors. And then,
I'll just comment really quickly on that.
Yeah.
The senior event we just did at the Pip Moyer Rec Centre, I'm not sure if any of you got a chance to, it was packed.
I'm too young.
You guys were all too young for it, so you probably didn't get an invite, but there was a massive turnout from all over the region for an event that was put on there. So.
And then the third image is just speaking to our transportation network, which is, I don't want to generalize. Everybody gets around differently. Certainly our roadway network has to serve all users, whether you drive or you want to walk or ride a bike or take transit. But the sidewalk network is kind of the fundamental building block for that network, and allowing people to take short walks if they feel comfortable doing that to a convenience or to a park is really important. And I think a quote that we have here from AARP that I really stand by is, if you build a community great for an older adult, you build a community great for everyone. So I think that's a good mantra for the comp plan. Let's see. I'm going to go into the land use chapter. Actually, this is municipal growth. There were not major changes here. Let me actually. Sorry, this is not the best way, but in land use, we didn't see much in the way of new changes. I think some of the goals and performance measures got simplified in these profiles of major infill sites, where we have highlighted 12 major properties in the city where we anticipate some change happening in the near future. What we added to the large shopping center sites was a statement that says, you can see it under the West 2 Shopping Center here, under West Annapolis Shopping Center, Eastport Shopping Center, Hillsmere, shopping at Bay Forest. It just says, include high-performance environmental features to ensure a substantial improvement in the environmental quality of the surrounding area. Now, it's broad, but I mean, in this, we're talking about stormwater, we're talking about tree canopy, we're talking about the things that are going to benefit environmental quality. And we put it under these shopping center sites because these are by and large the places where you have large expanses of asphalt that raises the temperature of those sites. They don't have functioning stormwater systems. They're older properties. They could be a lot better performing. So that's the... we scrubbed the references to form-based code. It's form-based zoning throughout the document. This is just one place within the land use chapter, and in the implementation chapter, you can see any reference to form-based is form-based zoning, and that works fine. People recognize that term as well, and in the industry and planner world. So this that's something that we did throughout the document. Getting into the housing chapter, nothing real major, I would say, in this chapter. Nothing really was suggested. We had made some significant changes in the last iteration of the plan. In transportation, I mentioned it before, I want to highlight this. It was mentioned at the last work session, the need, or the one before that, this need that when we're talking about Vision Zero, which is, we have a whole spread on vision. This is the philosophy on reducing traffic-related injuries and fatalities. Communities all over the country and the world are adopting a policy of Vision Zero that says, enough is enough. We can do things to reduce or eliminate these incidents. And it starts with understanding where they happen. This map on the right has already been in the plan. But what we did, when we talk about Vision Zero, we highlight this, the amendment that was requested was, we really need to talk about roadway design as sort of the engineering, as kind of the primary way of impacting change here. And so we highlight the primary roadway network in this map on top, where our major corridors are that really all need kind of a hard look. And then we have some new text that explains why this is important, what it could look like, and really brings, on the left you can see the 6 elements of Vision Zero. Only one is engineering. You have engagement, enforcement, emergency medical services, equity, evaluation. So we're highlighting the engineering aspect of that, and that was a requested change. Yes.
Alderman Savage?
So I think that's really helpful to see. Thank you. Another suggestion would be maybe maybe you've already done this, tying together this with the safe routes to school. Perhaps showing on that map, like putting little dots where the schools are in particular.
Great idea.
What color are you going to use for that?
And I just say I'm really pleased that you have included that. That was a catalyst for the change in the Netherlands. They'd had enough of school children being hit by automobiles, and that's when they made a conscious decision to change the culture. We're hoping for a culture change in Annapolis, I know that, and hoping to lead the way for Maryland here. So thank you for including that.
I was thinking about, as I was nearly going to miss this meeting, stuck in St. Mary's traffic on Duke of Gloucester, I was thinking, well, every school needs to have a safer way of walking and biking, or getting to, so that you don't have to have so many cars picking up. But that's the nature today.
Thank you, Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you talk about the Vision Zero policy, in the book you mentioned Anne Arundel County I was just curious how far they've been with it and what their success has been,
Well,
right? What did, yeah.
I participated on a stakeholder committee last year for they did a strategy plan. And that's the cover of it is this image here on the left. And it included a wide range of stakeholders. You know, City of Annapolis was just one stakeholder. They had county police, they had emergency medical services, they had the school system. They had a lot of folks. And this strategy document is policy oriented and it has recommendations for things they could do, but it doesn't really get into geographic focus areas. So that's really the thing they're working on now is kind of a more specific action plan that where are the places that they need to target. And they have a great website that I can share, but they developed a website that has current data on where all the traffic crashes happen, the people that are impacted, the demographics around those areas. So it's a pretty powerful website.
Thank you.
So I should also add that some of you have talked about this mobility plan. We have funding, we received a grant this year to do a citywide mobility, essentially a Safe Streets Action Plan from the federal program called Safe Streets for All. The intention of that is to sort of follow Anne Arundel County's Vision Zero lead, but go farther, and it has to be specific to Annapolis. So.
Work.
Yeah.
So, Alderman Savage?
Just real quick on that. It might be worthwhile, I think, at some point, maybe getting, well, maybe just from yourselves, or perhaps inviting the county as well to come present on. I don't know if we've ever received a presentation on that study. I don't think we did, because I've flipped through it myself, but it would be good to know. And I know the city's working on some aspect of the recommendations from that, and as well as the county, but it'd be good to know timeline and scope, because there's some things in there I suspect they're not going to do immediately, which is reduce the speed limit on Forest Drive. Anyway, it'd be good to hear from them at some point.
I think that would be a good idea. And we're working very closely with the county on Forest Drive improvement, and they're pursuing a lot of funding right now and they did the safety plan for Forest Drive. I think, there's a lot of recommendations already identified, and lowering the speed limit is definitely one of those. Let's see here. In the next chapter is community facilities. This is the chapter that focuses on parks, focuses on schools and other kind of, and focus on police, emergency services. There were not major changes to this chapter. We did add public safety as a planned priority at the beginning, but we already had a section in here focusing on public safety and policing, and it's pretty specific. So I'm going through this chapter. Arts, culture, and historic preservation. There were no changes to this chapter. We did tweak some of the goals and performance measures. I could say the same about the community facilities chapter. If you read those, I'll just highlight one. Let's see here. Yeah, just this one right here, for example, expand the capacity of the city to initiate and manage arts and cultural programs. I mean, I think it was a lengthier goal in the past. The basic idea here is, the city relies on a lot of other organizations. We have a volunteer board of professionals, but we could be doing a lot more internally. We could have a dedicated, arts staff person, et cetera. But that's just one example of kind of how we've tried to simplify these goals and performance measures. Environmental sustainability is the next chapter. Here, similar to the last two chapters, it was really about simplifying the goals and performance measures. There's not really any purple in the major narrative text. If you read this goal 1, resilience efforts are comprehensive, equitable, and relevant to all residents. I mean, that's just an example of trying to get more succinct. I think, let me find, there were at least, I think it's really in water resources. This is the last core element of the comp plan in terms of major topics. In here, while we didn't change any of the content of the chapter, I'll highlight a couple of things that in the goals and actions under provide high quality, safe drinking water to all customers, we added an action 4.4 that says, continue to perform annual assessments of the city's aquifers to ensure they remain safe from contamination and of adequate supply for projected growth. Now, some of this is, already a protocol, but I think just it was clear that there was an interest in being more upfront about that. And contaminants it's an evolving topic, so. And there's a new performance measure here that says the city's aquifers and water conveyance infrastructure continue to have sufficient capacity and pressure to meet existing needs and future development goals. Under this goal 5, it's about the wastewater system. We have a new performance measure that says linear feet of sewer mains inspected as a % of all sewer mains meet annual Department of Public Works benchmarks. Now, the way this is worded, we talk with Public Works about this, and they set goals every year. They're in our capital improvement program booklet, and they wanted to hold to those. I mean, so that's essentially why it's worded that way, and that's the way it ended up. But it was hard to kind of get to other, they're kind of, sounds like they're continually reassessing those goals. And so it's more about just being consistent.
Thank you, Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. So thank you for the last two additions in particular, but on this one, and it affects Alderman Savage even more than me, it's turning out that the increasing amount of high water is causing a lot of encroachment into our sewer system, and it's what's caused the overflow at the Edgewood Road water treatment plant. So I think this is a good addition because we know the water level is going up. And I think that it also means that we have some urgency to figure out where this encroachment is coming in. City Dock happens to be one of the areas. But it was a surprise effect for me that was causing the overflow over there. And that's something we're going to have a much closer relationship with the county. I think they're going to have to do something to change their infrastructure if we're going to have overflows, which we probably will. Maybe we need to cover the overflow because it's not very pleasant when you're getting the odorific. And apparently there are some health hazards from some of the gases from that overflow as well. So thank you for adding this one in particular. But I have been concerned about the aquifers, and probably is 100-year out beyond this plan's scope, but still we see it happening elsewhere in the country, so we ought to be aware we're tapping into the aquifers. So thank you for both of those.
Sure.
Thank you, Alderman Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think that it brings up a good point as far as the wastewater. I'd have to read through the goals again and the benchmarks, but in light of the issues we've been having with the odor, it's a plant that's jointly owned by the city, so maybe we should include things on there as far as, what's the term they use? Like the odor, high odor days or whatever
Yeah.
they have documented.
And there's state code about minimizing that.
Yeah, because I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but we were sent a report that shows that the odor levels were well beyond health standards. They can actually impact people's respiratory health. So if there's anything we can do to address that and make sure we keep moving forward, would be good.
I will definitely look into that. It's not something I'm that up to date on, to be honest, but I think you bring up a good point. I mean, that the treatment plant is a joint facility. I mean, we're going to have to work with the county on changes that happen there. And so I think acknowledging that would probably be a good thing here. The next chapter, development regulations, this follows up on the land use chapter quite significantly in terms of, highlighting the future land use map. One thing that is really important because it came up several times in the amendment is this notion of small area planning. So when we talk about strategies for implementation, we added a heading called small area planning, and we're pretty clear about what that means. That, when we take on zoning changes, for example, it's not done broad brush. We're not going to do a broad citywide rezoning. We're going to be very surgical, strategic, and base that on small area planning principles. And so that's clear here. And I think this chapter that cuts across the pages should address that pretty well. We had this piece about consistency with the city strategic plan as another strategy for implementation. And then when we talk about zoning reform, we obviously talk about the form-based zoning, but rather than, one thing we have in the land use chapter, we highlighted this West Annapolis plan that we did. But here, it made more sense to talk about the kind of things we shared at that last work session, which is that there are places in the city today that have the kinds of standards that essentially approximate a form-based zoning, and then they've led to very consistent development patterns, downtown, for example, or Eastport or Upper West Street. So these examples are highlighted here and just explained in this text that we have things we can look at already in Annapolis that could guide that form-based zoning and what's worked. It's not going to be the same for every neighborhood, but there are lessons that we could take from that. That is a summary of everything. So then, areas of critical state concern is our smallest chapter. It's really a state requirement that we have something in here about, how we're going to take advantage of the state programs for funding. And so we have a chart. This didn't really change at all. And then our recommended action matrix is the summary of all the goals and actions and performance measures. And this is consistent with the clarifying edits we made in each chapter. So that's the overview of how we've changed the plan till now. Again, I think the most substantial thing really is that those ward profiles, I think, are really something that make a big difference for the average reader.
Alderman Audette?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I want to thank you because I think you did an excellent job of capturing the things that we talked about. Unfortunately, I ran off without my stuff today, but it's probably just as well. And I do think it's improving. Fortunately, it's improving at a diminishing rate, which means I think we're close to having it where it needs to be. But I think these were major changes. I wanted to ask you to go over your sense of the timeline, because while we were talking and you were going through this, it sort of clarified to me the kinds of things that I think I would want to talk to my constituents about, and I have in mind a date that might actually work, but could you tell us again what you're thinking the timeline is?
Yes, certainly. So we're trying to get to a final copy of this draft, final draft, by June 20th. That's really, and that date was selected to give this body enough time prior to a meeting on the 8th of July, that time to, kind of go through it one more time, make sure you're comfortable. But based on your input, we could change that date. That was just sort of our assessment of what was reasonable.
Right.
And then so we backed up a week from that to the 13th of June as sort of the deadline to get final comments. So the idea of doing, like a hearing on the amendment, I mean, that could be incorporated into one of your council meetings in June. That's something that we hadn't thought about, but
So I thought about what my constituents might want to hear, and probably that's because what I want to hear presented to them. But I think the growth plans, and we talked about that at the last meeting, fortuitously, the governor's number of 96,000 workforce housing units, when you divide that by the state population and apply it to the city population, it comes out to approximately 637 units, which is very close to our 700 target in the plan. And I think that's, I still want to know where the governor got his number, but I think that's kind of affirming, and it kind of says that we're sort of in the sweet spot for where we want to go. So 1,200 units, 700 of them geared towards workforce housing. So the growth plans and a synopsis of that. That leads to the housing plans. Where's the growth going to be? And that leads to the ward plans, which that is such a very helpful addition to the plan. Rob used it at his town hall. I plan to use it at mine too, but it makes it very concrete. It makes it where you live, and this is what's going to happen. And that's associated with the 12 development areas, because they're happening in the different wards. Strengthening transit, which is really one of my biggest worries about the budget, and particularly next year's budget, not this year's budget, but I think that's what people are going to want to hear. But then post-plan, it would be nice to have a sense from you. You said earlier you want to get this done, passed, and so forth to get into the proposed zoning changes. Bingo. I think that's what most of my constituents are going to want to hear about. And Eric, you said earlier, Mr. Lashinsky, you said earlier that form-based zoning, or whatever we're calling it now, is not going to be the same everywhere. Well, I think people would want a sense of how is that going to be implemented. At one point, I heard something that sounded like it was going to be done as sort of an overlay. It may be, you've said it'll be different for different parts of the city. And that goes back, I think, to the growth plans and the housing plans, because that's how we're going to achieve this and distribute the growth. So the planned zoning changes, and the two that I know of are the form-based zoning, but also the collapsing of the number of zoning districts, especially in residential. Well, you're speaking to residents when you come to a civic association, so they're going to really want to understand more about what's in mind. Now, that is really post-comp plan, but that's part of the specter about the comp plan is, if we accept this, what does it mean is going to happen? And I think that's what people really want to hear. So I think those are the highlights of what I'm hearing from my constituents, and I think they would want a briefing. I was delighted to hear you say that you would be happy to come and do that. It turns out that I'm the featured speaker at the Civic Association meeting on June 18th, which is after June 13th, final amendments, but before the June 20th, but then I have to talk to them. It's their meeting. But I think that would be the opportune time to satisfy my promise to them at a civic association meeting, and we can broadcast it more broadly. But that kind of dovetails into your timeline, and I understand we can't let this plan go to 2040 before we enact it. So we need to sort of come to some closure. And so it's starting to fit together for me, the kinds of things that I'd like to hear. I think most people would. And I'll send you this points that I had here. And I think it pulls right out of the materials we already have. And then fortunately on June 24th, I go to Ireland and won't be back until the council meeting on the 8th of July. So whatever happens in that intervening thing, I'm going to turn my phone off, so I won't know. But in any event, so that timeline kind of brings us towards closure, at least from my perspective. My colleagues can speak for themselves. But again, I want to go back because when you first sent us the changes, I marked up the copies. Then you sent us the purple version, but I thought, God, they captured everything. This was really a good job. So you're to be complimented. I felt good about what you captured and got into it. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just share a text that I sent my colleague, Alderwoman Pendle Charles, but in her introduction, you do have a starting point in the historical section where I just asked her to sort of tie into that, because you do say this is a story that needs to be told, and it can't just be buildings. So that's good to sort of weave that in her introduction.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, this is the first comprehensive plan that's really being, I'd say, proactive in acknowledging the diversity of stories that still need to be told in the city,
Yeah.
and the way we think about arts and culture and historic preservation. And
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my response to Alderwoman Tierney was point well taken, and I'm going further and deeper.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great presentation. It's looked like an amazing document. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Looking forward to moving forward with this and addressing these things on the home stretch.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you all for continuing to be engaged on this.
Let me give you one of those. Right. Is there anything else for good order?
Let's go to the governors.
Well, at 5:30, you're all aware, at City Dock, I'll do for good order, we'll have the Wilma Lee down there. We're going to have Ray's Waterman's boat down there. There'll be the scissor lift for you to go up and see what the view from the second floor of the center is like we did last time. You can get a roasted oyster sample there that Ray's going to be roasting dockside. There's some virtual headsets that the architects added. I've never done that yet, so that sounds very interesting. We have a guest speaker to open the thing, Steve Ritterbusch. He wrote the Working Waterfront book that will be available at the event, and he's documented the evolution of the waterfront, the working waterfront in Annapolis. He's got some great stories in there. So there's lots to do for everybody, and then there's the breakout tables for people at various different aspects. One will be headed up by the Maritime Museum by Alice Estrada and Steve Ritterbusch, the programming of the Burtis House, what we would like to see there, the art, the sculpture in front of it, some of the programming of the general area. The Conference and Visitors Bureau will be there. Kristen Peronis will be heading up a table on what the visitor experience is going to be like in that. And then on this, another table will be Tyler Patton, the harbour master, and some of the maritime community heading up a table on maritime needs. It's going to be a really great event outdoors. We couldn't get better weather for it than today. So hopefully we'll all crush a couple of oysters and then go to McGarvey's afterwards. Anything else for good order? Okay, thank you. Great work, everybody. Meeting adjourned.